Joining us now is the chairman of that subcommittee, Texas Senator Ted Cruz. You know, you're not running for president, and we haven't seen you in years, Senator. I mean, we still recognize you with that beard, though. We know who you are. Good to see you.
Well, and you're welcome to come down to D.C. or Texas, and I'll join you any morning of the week.
We always love having you, Senator, obviously. Great to have a hearing, but when are we going to know the findings from the black box? Wouldn't it be better if we knew everything before you have a hearing?
Well, sure. Look, there's a process. The hearing today is the first hearing that we're holding on this to do what we can to ascertain, number one, what happened. 346 people died in two separate plane accidents. The early reports, the early indications are that the causes of those accidents were similar, that it may well have been a malfunctioning angle of attack sensor that caused this new technology on the 737 MAX, what they call the MCAS, to adjust the pitch of the plane downward and ultimately to dive it into the ground, taking 346 souls. We need to know where the investigation stands, what we know. But another major area of inquiry is the process of certification of the 737 MAX to begin with. There have been multiple reports that Boeing itself was deeply involved and embedded in the certification process. And from the Committee on Aviation and Space, we want to know how Boeing, how private companies are involved in the FAA's certification process. Is that process, why didn't that process catch this problem if this was the cause of the accident, and what needs to be done, number one, to make sure these planes are safe to fly, and number two, to make sure that the oversight and regulatory system is preventing and catching these malfunctions before they occur.
Senator, with something as high-tech and complicated as one of these aircraft today, how could the FAA possibly try to figure out how to certify it without the help from the company that manufactured it? I don't understand how that...
Well,
and I'm just wondering, is there any, and I've seen it, we had Ralph Nader on, at this point, is there some type of, anywhere you're looking, some type of implied malfeasance from any party in this whole process, in your view?
Look, there is very potentially malfeasance here. We don't know, and we're not going to jump to conclusions, but we need to see what the evidence holds. We have right now two planes in a period of 5 months that according to the satellite data, had very similar erratic altitude changes. And one of the issues of inquiry also is when this change was made, why was it not better reflected in the pilot's manuals? Why was it not part of the pilot's training? Imagine for a second you're a pilot on an Ethiopian plane. You're flying a jet. You think it's just like the 737 that you've flown for years, except suddenly the nose starts going down, and you don't know why, because there wasn't a signal to tell you that a computer system has suddenly started steering the plane down. On the old 737, if you pulled back the yoke, it disengaged the stabilization system. On the 737 MAX, you pull back the yoke, and it didn't disengage. So these pilots are pulling back the yoke. They're pulling out the manuals, trying to figure out what on earth is going on with this plane, and all the meantime, it's going down and down and down. That's not an acceptable outcome. That's not an outcome that is putting the safety of the flying public first.
Senator,
and yes, the company should be involved, but it is not the FAA's role to be handing the decision of certification over to the private company. The private company had economic incentives not to require any more training because that drives up costs. But if you've changed the system substantially, you got to make sure the pilots are trained adequately to ensure the safety of the flying public.
Senator, that's a very good summary of everything we've heard to this state, and a good stance, I think, on how you come at this. My question is, do you know anything about the new software fix that's supposedly being rolled out that will potentially allow these 787 MAX 8s to go back into the air? Does it have anything to do with what you just described, where if the pilot actually tries to pull up on the throttle, that it would disengage the system?
So I don't know the details of the software fix. I know what has been reported in the press, that part of the software fix is that it will analyze, there are two of these angle of attack sensors, and it will analyze when you have contradictory data coming from those two. That seems like a positive adjustment. At the end of the day, though, you've got to have the pilots knowing what's happening with the plane and with the ability to correct it. If the plane is steering down towards the ground and they don't have the ability to fix it, that is a major problem. And so I hope this software fix it enables us to fix the problem. But we need to be sure that this plane, that pilots know how to operate it safely. And so I'm going to wait and see. I think the FAA takes its job seriously. I called for grounding these planes before the FAA acted, and I'm glad that the FAA did act because, look, in the state of Texas, we have tens of thousands of jobs that depend on airlines. We have millions of Texans and Americans, including you and me and all of us, who get on planes every day. Our family gets on planes every day. And we need to have the confidence that when you buy a ticket on an airplane and you sit down,
it seems like
that your safety is going to be protected.
I don't know. In this country, it seems like maybe you'd have a better chance of being totally confident. I'm just wondering, can the FAA and Boeing sign off on every airline and every pilot in every country in the world? I mean, we have enough trouble with our federal agencies knowing what they're doing with one another. How can we possibly know whether Ethiopian Air brought its pilots up to speed as mandated by Boeing's guidelines or the FAA's guidelines? How do we possibly know that?
Listen, from the dawn of air flight, there has been a governmental role and a regulatory role ensuring that planes are safe. And there are legitimate roles for government regulation, and I think that's clearly one of them. You may well be right that in the United States we've got a greater assurance of safety. That's certainly what I've heard from the leadership of airlines, and I'm sure it's true that they have more vigorous pilot training. That's one of the things this hearing is going to try to get after is listen, when Boeing is selling these planes, where we've seen these accidents so far have been Ethiopia and Indonesia. What training, what manuals are the pilots being given? Look, Boeing is providing that, and you can't expect a purchaser of a plane to know everything that's new. At the end of the day, it's the seller of the plane who has an obligation to explain if you fundamentally change the operating system. You do have an obligation to explain that to the pilots who are going to be flying innocent passengers in that plane.
Senator, Airbus just won a big order from a couple of Chinese airlines. Are you concerned that Boeing is going to suffer lasting damage from this, including these hearings?
Look, there has long been politics between Boeing and Airbus. And listen, as an American, I hope that Boeing prospers and thrives and creates lots and lots of jobs, continues to create lots and lots of jobs here in America.
Hey, Senator,
but aside from that battle between these two companies, there is a basic obligation. We've had two crashes on the same planes within a few months that appear to be caused by very similar mechanical malfunctions. We need to prevent that. We need to keep people safe. That's the responsibility of government, of elected officials, and then we're going to let the marketplace take care. I have every faith Boeing can compete and compete well in the marketplace, but we need to make sure that we're keeping people safe in the air at the same time.
Did you... I see you voted present yesterday on that new Green Deal, Senator. What does that mean? You're afraid to take a stand? What happened there?
You know, it really is a remarkable thing. Yesterday the vote was 57 noes, 0 yeses, and virtually every Democrat voted present. I not only did not vote present, I voted no.
And we still know who you are. We still know who you are with that beard. That's what I said.
To set the record straight.
And you know what? If there'd been an option of voting hell no, I would have voted that instead of no.
Can I?
Yeah, I was going to go on.
I just want to know.
Back to Boeing? Yeah.
Well, no. As the head of the Committee on Aviation and Space, you think we're going to land on the moon in the next 5 years?
I think we are going to land on the moon. Whether 5 years is technologically and scientifically feasible, that's going to be a question ultimately for NASA and the scientists and engineers to determine. But we have a clear objective to go to the moon, and the moon is just a way station. Congress has passed into law legislation that I authored, bipartisan legislation, that makes clear that the long-term objective of NASA is to go to Mars, to land, and that the first boot that lands on the red planet will be the boot of an American astronaut. The moon is a way station to test the technology to get to Mars. I think that's important, but I also think it's important that NASA keeps the big picture of going to Mars and continuing America's unquestioned leadership in space, that they keep that front and center.
And real quickly, you know, while we're here, while we have you, how much of the Mueller report should be released? And do you think that there's anything to criticism from Democrats that Barr is somehow Trump's guy and willing to, I don't know, he's got a long, Mueller has a long career. I'm starting to hear his character impugned by the people that held him up in such high regard before. But do you think Barr would would consider the administration's wishes first and go against what he thought with his own integrity? What do you think?
Look, I've known Bill Barr for 25 years. He has 4 decades of principled service, public service. He has a demonstrated commitment to integrity. Now, the question of how much of the report should be released, I think all of it should be released. The country has gone through 2 years of national trauma. The public needs to be able to read that report, read it in its entirety. That's the right decision to make. I hope that's the decision the Department of Justice makes. But I also think you're seeing immediately Democrats and some in the media pivoting where, number one, they're no longer concerned about criminality. I did one of the Sunday shows with Jerry Nadler from the House who was saying, well, crimes are what Bob Mueller was looking at. We're looking at broader issues. And the Democrats are going to continue attacking the president nonstop for the next 2 years, and I believe their ultimate destination is impeachment, that they intend to impeach him, and It doesn't matter what the evidence is. It doesn't matter what the constitutional standard is of high crimes or misdemeanors. They hate the president, and we're going to see these attacks coming. We're going to see them coming from the media.
What about the ACA? You've never been a fan. Is that a smart move? All the good news for the administration, and then all of a sudden to go back to where they're going to have a target on their back about pre-existing conditions and everything else. And the election's coming. Is that smart to go back to ACA now with 2020 in sight, or what do you think? Would you have recommended that?
Well, listen, the devil is in the details, and it depends what the administration tries to do. I think there are still millions of Texans, millions of Americans who are hurting under Obamacare, who've seen their premiums skyrocket. Average families' premiums have gone up over $5,000 a year. So I believe we still need to finish the job, and that means repealing Obamacare and replacing it with a system that allows more competition, more choices, and lower premiums so that more families can afford health care. And we can do that while protecting pre-existing conditions. Now, you're exactly right. There are a lot of pitfalls and perils that if the GOP ends up in a bidding war with Democrats for who can provide more socialized medicine, I think that would be a very, very bad mistake. So I hope we don't have Republicans going down that road. But if we're expanding choices, expanding competition, and lowering premiums, that's a good road to be going down.
What do you think?
I guess I go back to, can you make that point again, what you were saying just about the prices going up and tying that to what? The lack of competition in the field? Is that what you think happened?
Sure. Sure.
Yeah.
Look. At the end of the day, economics 101. If you want prices to go down, you want more choices, more competition, more options. What Obamacare did is it created fewer choices, less competition, less option. In a great many counties across this country, there are 1 or 2 health care providers in the Obamacare market. And the consequence of that is people have seen their premiums skyrocket. I hear every day from Texans who say, I can't afford health insurance under Obamacare.
Sure.
And I'll tell you who's really been hammered by that is young people. Young people have seen their premiums go up hundreds of percent, sometimes thousands of percent.
Young people
That's
were paying
not right.
higher premiums because they were forced to be carrying this and forced to go ahead and pay in. That was going to be struck down anyway. Under the Bastille and the
Actually, that's not
healthcare.
right. So the reason young people were paid higher premiums is the way Obamacare works is it takes young, healthy people and it jacks up their premiums and uses that money to cross-subsidize other people who are sick.
To pay for the sick people who are there. I mean, that's kind of how insurance works in general, and insurance prices were out of control before Obamacare came along, too.
So with respect, that's not actually how insurance works. Insurance typically works where you don't just simply force people to cross-subsidize.
Right, you pay based on your demographics and whether you're likely to get sick. I understand some of that, but healthcare insurance was out of control before Obamacare came along.
So that's not insurance. That is simply taxing and redistributing. And by the way, let me finish this point, which is the people that you're taxing, the young people. Hold on a second. The people that you're taxing, the young people, are typically less wealthy. You're taking money from people who are less wealthy, and you're giving it to people who are more wealthy. Let's move to the other point.
Health insurance.
Well, that's the heart of Obamacare.
Well, health insurance was out of control before Obamacare came along. How do you fix that? If that was under a complete, free market?
Look, there are no doubts that there have been challenges in health insurance for a long time. What we want to see is health insurance policies that are affordable and also that are portable. One of the major fixes, if you look at the problem of pre-existing conditions,
I agree with
many
being
of
able to
them
transport
came
across state lines.
Well, but we don't have that. I mean, Obamacare doesn't give you that. And what that means is where a lot of people ran into problems is if you lose your job tomorrow, you don't lose your car insurance or your house insurance or your life insurance. Why should you lose your health insurance?
Yeah.
You ought to be able to take your health insurance from one job to another job to another job, and that solves much of the problem of pre-existing conditions where, just like your car insurance, you have it rather than being tied to employment. Okay. And it's an accident of history that health insurance comes from employment.
I want to get to Kramer, but we got 10 seconds. I'm just going to ask you real quickly. You were part of that slim, narrow field of Republicans last time of only 18. Now that we've got, I need exponential notation for the Democrats, but in 10 seconds.
I think there's 672 Democrats running right now.
In 10 seconds, who would you worry about in terms of running that would be formidable, and who do you wish would get the nomination?
Listen, I worry about all of them. I think what the election is going to be, all of the energy, all of the passion in the Democratic Party is on the extreme left. Yep. To my mind, the top tier is Kamala Harris, Beto O'Rourke, Bernie Sanders, and Elizabeth Warren. I think it's likely one of those four will be the nominee. I think they're all coming from the extreme left. And what's dangerous, I think the 2020 general election is a coin flip. I think it's 50-50, and we could very possibly nominate an avowed socialist. That's dangerous for this country. I'm working hard to prevent it, but I think that's where we are electorally.
You got some Austin creep down in Texas, don't you? What's going to get it together, would you? I mean, a great state of Texas. What's happening down there? Anyway.
Well, apparently running against me and losing is something of a launching pad for running for president.
Hey, to get anywhere close to defeating you makes him a giant, Senator. Anyway, good to have you on today.
Always a pleasure.
And hope to see you soon. Let's get down now to the New York Stock Exchange. Jim